hooked up here.
This was my brother, like 5 months of doing the eating fat stain thing. So I don't know, there might be something to it.
Don't show that to these ladies in here.
I know, right? It's my baby brother. Why would I lie about that?
It's not.
Yeah. Look at the face. Ignore the abs.
I can't.
Yeah. My mom has black hair. My dad has red hair.
Hey, they have the same abs too. Just can't.
You just hit it.
Just can't tell. Right. Just for you.
It was eating fat to stay thin. Like drinking like whole milk and eating fatty foods. Some theory that your body processes animal diet or fat.
Oh wait, this is the extra one. Y'all have one.
Okay.
You think that just like I'll listen to your story,
Right.
I think one argument for that is people would say that when you're like eating lots of fats and proteins, you usually get filled up quicker. So like if you eat 500 calories of fat and protein, you usually feel full longer than if you eat 500 calories of like, a Frappuccino or something. Like you're still hungry after it, even though it's the same amount of calories. So I think that's part of it. And of course, how many hours a day does he work out?
4.
So that might have something to do with it too. Can you imagine? It's like for us who that's not our job. So you get up at 6, work out for 2 hours, go to work, go home, work out for another 2 hours or something. It'd just be crazy.
It's annoying, like when he comes out, because I never get to see him, and
Yeah.
he won't quit working out. Like I have to always sit around the house, wait for him to finish working out. I'm like, come on, dude. You see me twice a year, just hang out.
Yeah. It's crazy. All right. So if you remember, we're talking about the thyroid hormone, metabolic rate. We talked about this diagram, which I believe this is the one I gave you, right? Yeah, that's the cold one. So what I was going to have you do with your group, and I guess Alex, maybe you want to go over there with Ross, so y'all can have a group of 2 since nobody else is there. I know. They were just feeling depressed about the cat, I think. So anyways, you've got 3 questions to answer. Actually, let's do this first. Quick review, and then we'll do the questions. What in the world? Hold on. All right, so you remember those feedback diagrams that we'll keep doing over and over again? There's always a stimulus, a receptor, control center, and an effector. And then the effector If it's negative feedback, which they basically all are, the effector turns off the stimulus. So if the stimulus is high body temperature, the effector lowers your body temperature. If the stimulus is low body temperature, what do you think the effector does? Raises your body temperature, right? So let's look at how that works for thermoregulation.
Depends on a nervous feedback
Whoa.
loop, beginning with thermoreceptors.
I think it's a little loud.
A group of neurons in the hypothalamus of the brain functions as the body's thermostat. These neurons in the preoptic region of the hypothalamus integrate signals that come from thermoreceptors throughout the body. In its turn, the temperature control center in the preoptic area stimulates the heat-losing and heat-promoting centers in the hypothalamus.
All right, so let's see what happens with high temperature, which is the one.
When body temperature becomes too high,
we did
either
low.
under extreme heat stress or during exercise, the control center in the preoptic region inhibits the heat-promoting center and stimulates the heat-losing center. Output signals from the heat-losing center to blood vessels in the skin cause them to dilate. This allows the relatively warm blood to enter the skin in large amounts. The sweat glands in the skin produce perspiration that collects on the surface of the skin. The evaporating sweat cools the skin, which cools the blood that is then recirculated in the body.
All right, so with your group then, for that response to high body temperature, I want to know stimulus receptor, control center, and effectors. Going over there.
Going.
Go. Go.
Let's just shout it out.
No, I want you to talk to your group about it first.
Uh,
Talk to your group mates, Ross.
That's like, should we just shout it out?
Y'all don't see his group over there? I see all of them. They're all sitting there.
Yeah.
Shut that door.
The stimulus is
Check. Got it.
Oh, and don't get confused. This is your, wait, which one is this one? Yeah, so this is the cold body temperature loop. That's not the one we're looking at. This is the high body temperature one. So stimulus receptor control center effector.
Yeah, on that one question.
yeah.
Yeah, but still.
So did y'all get all
Yes.
those?
Yes, that's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
We're relating it to the cold too, not just hot. Yeah.
I know. Well, the next one, yeah, we're going to practice the hot one. It's confusing because you got to have one loop for both directions. Otherwise, you would just get colder and colder.
Oh, that would be a reaction.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
They're both negative feedback.
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah. All right. So what's the stimulus? What direction though? Yeah, so high body temperature is stimulus for this diagram we're talking about. Where's the receptor? So there's a few different places. One's in the skin, and then also there's some in the hypothalamus that sense whether your body temperature is too high. Where's the control center? That's true as well. So you've got two different receptors. You could say skin and hypothalamus. Control center is hypothalamus. What's the effector? So
Dilating, dilating, and then
Your blood flow increases and you perspire.
okay, so it's not perspiration, but
The evaporation of it.
what actually does it?
it's cooling.
The sweat glands. So the effector is the sweat gland. And what makes the blood, more blood to the surface? What does that? Yeah, so what structure then? Yeah, so like the blood vessels, or the blood vessels close to the surface. So an effector is always a body structure. It's not so much the response. Do you know what I mean? You wouldn't say the effector is more blood flow or increased heart rate or something. It would always be the heart or the blood vessels. And if you even wanted to extend it, you could always put, maybe it would make more sense if you put a new category of response underneath the effector. That may clear it up.
You said,
This is always like a body structure.
so you said the blood vessels, or you can say the sweat gland.
Yeah, it would be both,
Okay.
because both would happen at the same time. And then the response, that'd be what the effector does, like perspiration or more blood flow, something like that. Oops. So that's the hot one. And of course you have access to that link if you want to review it as well. So let's take a look at the cold one.
If body temperature becomes too low, the control center in the preoptic region stimulates the heat-promoting center. Output signals from the heat-promoting center cause muscles to contract in a repetitive cycle called shivering and stimulate the release of hormones that increase tissue metabolism. Additionally, nerve impulses cause blood vessels in the skin to constrict, decreasing the flow of warm blood near the skin's surface, and thereby recirculating warmer blood back to the body's core. The result of the forced heat production and the minimized heat loss in the peripheral parts of the body returns body temperature to normal, and homeostasis is restored.
So that's a little bit of the cold stress, but you've got the full description on this diagram. So I didn't quite include everything. And I'll just point out the shivering one. Why does shivering warm you up? Do what?
Is that the contractile response?
So how does that make heat?
Because you're using up ATP, which byproduct is heat.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not actually the movement of the muscles or something, which maybe I think that's what I thought at some point.
Friction of my shivering.
It's not like the friction. Yeah, that's what I kind of thought, I think. But yeah, you're exactly right. Just if you're using up ATP, you've got to make more, and that creates heat. So, that's interesting. I don't remember the last time I was cold enough to be like shivering.
Oh, it's coming.
Yeah, I know. All right, so with your group, why don't you work on number 2. And make sure for these, like all these questions that are similar, you're describing what problems the person would actually have and why. Oh, and I should tell you, it is about this diagram. So we're talking about their response to, I keep forgetting which this is, to cold. So it's this diagram that you got, the cold response.
Yeah. I think you'll give an answer that's not, yeah, that's ugly.
You have any ideas so far?
I asked her what a stroke was.
What?
I asked her what a stroke was.
Oh, that's fine. It's to cut off a blood flow to part of the brain.
So like in my experience, I've seen people, like there's this young girl
Uh-huh.
in her 20s, she had a stroke and she's paralyzed this way. She can't talk, can't swallow that well.
So after that's what could happen to you? Yeah.
Normally, yeah, if you don't get
Like
talk.
forever? Like you
Mm-hmm. Because your brain dies, like part of your brain dies.
It's called the golden hour. If you have less than 60 minutes to hurry and go get a blood thinner from the hospital, and
Somewhere in the middle of the sentence, just not.
that's when they usually fly people to Swedish.
I needed to go through class to
The change the effects
Oh
of
my
the stroke.
God.
Yeah.
Could that be like caused by
Like
having
high
your
blood,
head?
no, from like high blood pressure. They say like if you go get your hair done, like when you have your head back in a sink for so long, it pinches off the blood vessel and so it clots. And then when you
Like
lift
it
up,
hurts?
it's
go back to be like,
Really?
Sometimes like it hurts to like having you just like want to.
How come people don't constantly have strokes at the hairdresser then?
There's been a few,
Yeah. Yeah.
but now I notice they've been putting towels so you don't have to bend as far back now.
Yeah, because they were losing too many people at the going in to get a haircut and just not coming out. Yeah, so you're trying to relate that question to this diagram on the back there. So like what would happen?
Crazy.
So when would their temperature decrease? Like all the time or just if they were in a certain situation? The person.
For A?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. If it was colder, or if they were cold outside.
Yeah, so that's an important part of the answer. So if it was a nice temperature, like in room temperature, then nothing would happen to them,
Yeah.
right? Okay, so for, what do y'all have for A then?
We put that the effector would never be put into effect.
Okay.
The control center couldn't send anything.
Okay, so it's like the first half of the answer. So what would that do to the person then? Like what symptoms would they have? When would they have those
I
symptoms?
feel like they'd be shivering a lot.
Well, talk it through, see if you can figure out.
I think it's okay because I feel because I tried if I do this.
Come on, y'all can do this. You can do it. Getting distracted.
Their body will never, their body will never effectively being cold. Does that make sense? Like, it's never gonna pass the brain. It's never gonna go into the receptors to the.
Cool. And then what would happen to their body temperature for B?
Yeah, exactly. If it never gets past the
Yeah.
control center, it's never even gonna.
They would freeze solid.
Yeah.
What happens when you're cold all the time?
Well, would this person be cold all the time?
Yeah.
All the time? What if it was hot out? So when would they be cold? There you go. Right? They can't
So
respond.
they be cold when they're cold?
When it's cold out, when they're in a cold environment, right? For A.
Oh, right?
I was talking about A. Because A, you didn't say what's happening to the person. You just said block signals.
Yeah, I don't know if it's in-depth enough, but if it never passes the control center.
Sorry, which one are we doing? A?
Yeah.
Okay.
It never gets to the effector, which that means they'll never reach homeostasis body-wise. You'd have to put hot blankets and stuff on them, like you'd have to use your environment, outside sources to warm their body. Their
All the
body will never
time?
do it.
Or just in certain
In
situations?
certain situations.
Yeah,
because you
just,
could overheat
yeah,
them.
yeah. I
So-
was gonna say it'd be opposite when they get too hot too, because their control center would never work either to reduce them back to cool.
Right. So
Internally, their body wouldn't work.
when would they be cold then?
When,
Winter?
Yeah.
After that.
yeah, when they're outside, stand in front of the freezer too often, I don't know.
Well, so you think that's like a silly one, but
No.
a lot of people would just write the person will be cold all the time, which is not true.
Right,
It's only if they're exposed to cold,
To
they
cold.
can't fix it.
right.
Right? Because otherwise this isn't turned on
Right, right.
at
What
all.
happens if the person is cold all the time? So they're just naturally freezing all the time?
Yeah, and the one thing to not get confused with is the feeling of cold and your actual body temperature changing.
Oh,
So the
So that's two different things.
yeah.
The next time my sister says she's always cold, I'm going to tell her she's lying.
No,
Well,
so
take your
what's body
temperature first.
That's what I was gonna say. No, you say no, what's your body temperature? Because you're really not going. And she's gonna say, go away.
And you can tell her the only efficient way to check it is the rectal thermometer.
I was just gonna, oh my god.
And then see, then you can make sure. Got to get the internal temperature. It's the only good way.
And you say, and here's your thermometer.
Yeah.
I would totally make you.
Okay, so if those receptors become active all the time, why would you be cold?
Your body doesn't produce heat?
So if you look at that diagram, what happens if those receptors are always on? What happens to you? Does the control center get turned on?
Oh, it does?
If receptors are on, that turns the next step on, right? That's what receptors do.
I told you guys.
So what would happen? What would happen to the person then? Why would they be hot?
I told you.
Or I should say their body temperature goes up, right? Why is that?
It's because they're active all the time and they're uncontrollable. That's how I saw it.
Because the
Well, not in control.
receptors are working.
So like what effectors are, so why would they become hot? What's happening to them?
Your thyroid gland overacts.
Okay, so you're making too much thyroid hormone. What else?
The medulla produces hormones that increase cellular metabolism.
Which will make you hot as well.
And then, so would it be all the effectors, like you know, like sugar and stuff?
Well, what do you think?
Yeah.
Right? So the way these feedback things work is if you're turning on this top one, that means everything below it gets turned on. So they're going to be shivering, even though they're hot. You know, their body temperature's up. Things like that.
They would be shivering, but they would be hot.
Because it's broken, right? That's what B's about. It's broken. I think you may have been reading B as the thermoreceptors are broken and not on. Whereas it says active all the time. Yeah, you got to read it all the way.
I'm not writing this, I wanna make sure it's right. Okay.
Yeah.
So for B, if
Uh-huh.
our thermoreceptors are active all the time, then
Yeah.
we think we're shivering, we're cold, literally like our body temperature thinks we're constantly freezing all the time.
So what would your body temperature do then?
Drop. Well, it would try to be
Wouldn't it
heating.
be like regular?
It would be trying to heat itself
So would your body temperature go up or down?
It'd go up.
up all the time.
So we're constantly going up.
Would you end up overheating?
Well, I mean, you have that other system.
So then that would be working at the same time if that was broken?
Yeah, but don't worry about that.
No, but would they
But
be
yes.
working overtime too?
Yeah.
Because they're broken too.
Poor people's bodies.
He's broken.
Yeah. Which is sort of what happens in a fever, right?
Yeah.
You're hot and you're shivering and
And
sweating.
Yeah,
I don't know, I just get
when
really
your fever
cold.
breaks.
Yeah, so that's actually when your control center changes the set point of your temperature.
My body temperature literally never increases.
Interesting,
for a fever.
okay.
So basically, if for B, you're always turning on that. So you're making all these effectors turn on.
Okay.
All right. So I looked at 2 with you. So what about 3? When? All the time? When do you need it to increase? There you go. Do you think you would always, your body temperature would stay low? Or do you think you'd be okay?
Without, you'd probably stay low.
Yeah. You've got 3 other effectors though. Right.
Keep forgetting those.
Yeah. Or do you think maybe it would depend on how cold it was?
Yeah.
That's what I would
Maybe
think.
you wouldn't want to go skiing.
Like if you go outside and it's 50, you'd be fine because you've got all these other ones. But if you're laying in the snow and it's 0, maybe those other 3 effectors wouldn't be good enough. So I'd put something down about that. All right, so what did y'all say for C?
When you gain weight.
Yeah, usually you gain weight, and you have to have a supplement.
Yeah, you probably would gain some weight because your metabolic rate. What about your response to cold? How would that be affected?
You'd be cold a lot, right?
Yeah, because you've taken away one of your effectors, right? So it's very similar.
Also, the effectors is what causes you to like warm up.
Exactly. That's what they're there for.
I know this. I know.
And you wouldn't necessarily be cold all the time. You'd be cold just like for A. You'd be cold when it's cold outside. And certainly gain weight, like you were saying.
For C?
Mm-hmm.
Because it is the thyroid hormone, which increases your metabolic rate. Your metabolic rate would obviously decrease. So since this isn't completing the effectors, would you ever regain back to homeostasis because it's one of the effectors?
Well, do you think those other 3 effectors could help raise your body temperature?
They would go into like overtime,
Okay.
but I bet it would work.
So do you
It
think
would
maybe
take-
it would depend, like, so you think it would take longer to warm up?
Yeah, yeah.
That'd be a good
Because
answer.
you've lost.
You've got 3 out of 4
Yeah,
only working.
okay.
What happens if you have an overactive thyroid?
So you've got too much hormone, your metabolic rate's faster, you might be hot, and you're gonna break down all your stored energy faster, you're probably hungry more
How
often.
does that work with menopause then? 'Cause aren't you?
It slows down.
Yeah, because your hormones are losing them. How does it?
Well, you're not losing thyroid hormone, you're just losing estrogen and
I
progesterone.
didn't know because they
But I
have
think
heat
estrogen influences a lot of stuff.
Because they have like heat flashes and stuff. So
Yeah, I don't know where the hot flashes come from
Oh, okay.
exactly.
Not like
I'd have to look that up.
Okay.
Well, it might be,
I don't.
but I don't know exactly. I mean, you know how like during your cycle, like your body temperature changes,
yeah.
and that's under the influence of
Yeah.
hormones. But I don't know the link exactly.
Yeah.
Like how those hormones do that, like the ovulation
Yeah.
temperature test
Yeah,
thing.
or whatever.
Those things are just weird.
Dude.
Weird.
Yeah. Okay.
It's crazy. I'll have to look those up. All right. I think that was it. Oh, let's do a quick This will be a good review for the exam anyways. Escape. Come on, come on. Oops. Oh, that's good. All right, so those feedback diagrams, did you feel like that was a little bit hard to do? We're going to keep practicing those, and that means you're really going to have to think critically about them. Actually look at them, and it's going to look confusing at first, but you just take it a little step at a time and say this does this, this does this. What happens if this is crossed out or this does too much?
Is that going to be on the test?
Yes.
Are we going to get a copy of the?
It depends. Depends on how hard the question is. If I had a really hard question, then you get one of these. If it's an easy question,
Fifth grader, if it's hard for them, and if it isn't.
they're smart. Be careful with that. But the key thing is, I think, is just you're not going to look at those diagrams right away and know the answer. Did you feel like you looked at it and you just knew it? Or did you have to kind of like piece it together? Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with you. I had to piece it together too. Like I write these questions and then I don't really know the answer until I look at the diagram and think about it. It's got to kind of like take it through a couple steps. All right, so quick review then. You should be able to do this without looking at anything, these questions. So how does the body respond to the body temperature rising too high then? You're drinking a pina colada? She is. She's drinking a pina colada in class.
Awesome.
Cool. Uh-huh. Sure.
Is it alcohol?
What a great trade-off. All right, so E is right. Sweating and vasodilation of blood vessels. What about too low? Bet you all got it right. 80% for F, which is right. Thyroid hormones released, and the blood vessels constrict. And you constrict the blood vessels by the skin so that you keep your blood more into the core, because as it gets close to the skin, it loses heat. If you're cold, you don't want to lose any more heat. So that's where hypothermia comes from, because the colder you get, the more vasoconstriction happens and the less blood flow you get to your fingers and your toes. And I guess your nose, right? Where else do you get frostbite usually? Your ears, fingers, toes. Yeah, your extremities basically. And I guess your nose is probably just because it's like so exposed and sticking out. And I don't think there's that much blood flow there anyways to start with. To the skin, you know. Crazy. All right, so you did all that. So let's do some exam review. So why don't we do 25 part 2 since we were just talking about it, and then we'll go back to 23.
It's just, but we just did that one. Think about that. Like explain why heat production is related to metabolic rate. That was on the other question.
So anyone who want answers to on that section?
I just have a question.
Yes.
Okay. On K, explain
The
how
last.
production is directly linked to the metabolic rate. Can we kind of go back to the group thing we just did
Mhm.
with the thyroid? Could you explain it like that?
Yeah,
Linked to
so
your metabolic rate, so. Crap.
well, you could almost explain it. So
It would take longer to heat up because you're losing one of your effectors.
that's part of it, but basically basically what that's saying is why does when your metabolic rate go up, your heat production go up? What do you mean?
You're working on your.
You're producing more.
Well, maybe I should ask you, what's metabolic rate? What is that a measure of? How fast? What?
Your chemical reaction.
And specifically, how fast you're breaking down glucose to make. Okay. So if you're breaking down glucose faster, because your metabolic rate goes up, why does your heat production go up?
It's a byproduct of ATP production.
Yeah, because 40% of that energy in glucose becomes heat when you break it down. That's why it's directly linked. You can't increase your metabolic rate to make more ATP without increasing heat production as a side effect. There's no way to break them in half. If you're making ATP, you're creating heat when you're breaking down glucose. When you're making ATP, so metabolic rate going up means you're breaking down more glucose to make ATP, which means you're making heat when you're breaking down glucose. Which, as a few group mentioned, that's why if your thyroid hormone is removed, your metabolic rate goes down, you're breaking down glucose slower, which means you're probably going to gain weight and be colder if you're in a cold environment. Discuss the significance of cholesterol to disease. Sure, do you remember what's the bad cholesterol? Okay, so if you have high levels of LDL, it gets deposited in the arteries and can cause plaques that contribute to heart attacks and strokes. And keeping it pretty simple on that one, in patho we're going to go into more detail of how that happens. But diet and liver are the two sources of cholesterol. So for H, basically that's this diagram you did. and all these questions. And I think the key thing to think about is, you could probably kind of puzzle through it. Is it about storing energy? Which state is it if you're like storing something for later? It's probably the absorptive state. If it's anything about breaking things down, it's probably the post-absorptive state. So I think it's probably easier to think about it that way than try to memorize all 12 of those statements that you answered. So just kind of think about the idea of it, and then you can probably figure out anything I'd write. Oh, we'll go back to 23. You're all good for 25? Part 2? All right, so let's go back to the beginning. 23, part 1. Yeah, so the mucociliary escalator consists of two main things, right? You have the goblet cells, which produce mucus, and that traps foreign particles. And then, what's the second part of it?
Cilia.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah, exactly. So you've got the cilia throughout the respiratory tract, moving it upwards. The mucus, and so you can create loogie. There you go. So it's basically right in the name there. Muco for mucus, ciliary for cilia. So you just kind of think about what those two things do. And you probably have it. And I think it's important. I don't think most people realize that you're making mucus way down here, down into the lungs even. I think we generally think it's just made in the sinuses. Is that kind of what you'll tend to think? I don't know. I feel like that's sort of the general idea that people would have.
Until you start listening to lung sounds.
Here's some mucus in there. Where things are going. Like Hillary, she's got some mucus in her lungs right now.
Some infected mucus.
She has pneumonia. Pneumonia. And Trump's going to be on Dr. Oz for Dr. Oz to tell him he's overweight today.
I saw something
That's
that had,
funny.
like, a picture of Obama.
Hillary's probably overweight too. Don't you think? You don't think so? I don't know. I bet she is. Oh, does the BMI thing for overweight, does that change based on age, or is it like once you're an adult? It's just height and weight, right?
And they don't factor in muscle or anything.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's not always the best measure.
No.
That should be something I think looked at and possibly recalculate.
Treat the patient, not the number.
There you go. That sounds like a good one. All right, anyways. Enough about our candidates' health problems. Henry Harrison got pneumonia and died a month after he was not nominated, what's it called? Sworn into office. He got pneumonia the day he gave his speech outside. He died in a month. Yeah, I know. He talked for 2 hours, apparently. Anything else? Oh, did y'all get to change I there? Did I tell you that at some point?
Yeah.
All right, so everybody has it fixed? All right. So what about 23 part 2 then? Should we actually get to doing those in class? D? Yeah, let's see. I've got a few pictures from the PowerPoint for one of those.
What is D? What is the question?
Let's see if I can find those. All right. So the first one, high altitude. What do you think for that one?
I put that back. Pressure decreases in
Oxygen concentrations decrease.
Yeah. And if you remember, let's see, didn't we do where's that feedback diagram? So it says reduces the rate of gas exchange. So you said there's less oxygen in the air. So that means less oxygen gets into the blood when you breathe it in. So what do you think happens to your breathing rate at higher altitudes?
It increases.
Right? Because that's that controlled respiration feedback one. If there's less oxygen in the air, you end up with less oxygen in your blood, which is the stimulus to turn on faster and deeper breathing.
That's why you use triple mountain.
Yeah, so if you're going up to 25,000 feet, it's going to be tough. And I don't know if you know, let's watch this Everest movie. So in order to acclimate to not use oxygen, they basically, sleep up high, but then multiple times before they try to get to the very top, they'll hike up 2,000 feet, spend the night, go back down to chill out for a while, and then go hike up there again and stay for 3 nights, higher up, go back down, to get the body to make more red blood cells and get used to the altitude. So they'll be there for like 3 or 4 weeks. When it's, if you tried to hike it straight from the bottom to the top, it'd only take you like 4 days or something. And the Sherpas actually have genetic mutations that help them function better at high altitudes. I think their hemoglobin's different or something. I can't remember exactly what it was. They just studied it a couple of years ago.
I worked with a cook who started cooking as a guide on Mount Everest.
Oh, yeah?
His name was Pima Pima.
On E for like part 2 on 23, was that from like one of the worksheets you did in class?
Yeah.
You wanted us to compare on?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's what I did. I just wanted to
Yeah.
go over these.
Yeah. Oh, I guess we should finish D though. So, pulmonary edema. Can't believe they didn't tell me that we didn't finish this. So pulmonary edema is basically getting fluid in your alveoli, like fluid buildup from low blood flow, like heart disease, heart failure, that kind of thing. And so here's normal. If you remember your alveoli, they're supposed to just fill up with air. So you can have oxygen go in, CO2 go out of the blood. But if you end up with fluid in here, What do you think that's going to do to this whole process?
Decrease the surface area.
It's not so much the decreased surface area as the distance it has to go. Because remember what kind of cells are in there? What shape? It's not cuboidal.
Oh, columnar. No?
Not an alveoli. It's what? Transitional, no. It's simple squamous. So I think somebody said squamous, somebody said simple. Put them together. So you're only supposed to have to go this far. You know, this little distance. That's normal. But if you end up with pulmonary edema and that whole half the alveoli is full of water, like that, now how far does it have to go? It has to travel all the way through here to diffuse. And the farther it has to diffuse, the longer it'll take, and the less oxygen actually gets into your blood. And this would be edema. This is the alveoli. And then up here is the blood going past. So this O2, I'll put it closer. And here it only has to go such a short distance. Does that kind of make sense?
So is it just the
Yeah, the oxygen and CO2 have to diffuse a farther distance, which makes it less efficient. All right. Emphysema. What's the number one cause of emphysema? So that's from smoking and breathing in all those like toxic chemicals, etc. It actually breaks the alveoli down, and they end up just going away basically. And you'll start getting, instead of these nice tiny little grape sacs, you'll end up with basically big holes. So instead of a big cluster of grapes, you end up with just one big circle, which is less surface area then for volume. And if you have less surface area, then you're going to have less diffusion or slower diffusion. Diffusion, because there's less area for it to happen in. Which is why, what's one of the main treatments for emphysema? How do you usually know someone's has emphysema? What do you see? Yeah, so obviously not all the time, but once it gets bad, you just have to, what is oxygen? Why would oxygen help then? What do you think?
When you breathe in, there's a higher concentration of oxygen molecules in what you're breathing.
Right. So instead of breathing in the normal amount, you breathe in extra, you can overcome this low surface area and still get enough oxygen into your blood.
Still smoke around it.
The oxygen, yeah, it's a little flammable. And I guess the same thing for like babies, putting them on oxygen if they're premature, have some issues. You could just overcome that problem by just giving them extra oxygen until they develop fully or the problem's fixed. All right. So somebody's asking me about another one. Oh. Where I want to go. I think I passed this one out. So I think you probably have this on an assignment somewhere. Uh-oh. Why didn't y'all tell me? So very similar to all the other feedback ones we've looked at. So you've got your stimulus, which is low oxygen or high CO2, detected by receptors in the medulla, which is in the brain, or receptors in the arteries. That's the receptor part. Control centers in the medulla oblongata. And of course, if you have low oxygen, what do you need to do? You just need to breathe faster or breathe deeper. So the effectors are the muscles that control breathing. And then the response is increased oxygen, lowered CO2 in the blood. And so for that one, if it was on the test, it'd either be ask you how this works somehow, or give you the diagram and asks you what happens if this part's broken or overactive or something. And the same thing for the body heat ones. Either I'll just ask you how it works, or give you the diagram and ask you about what happens if this part does this instead or something. And I guess one thing to remember, if you just write something sort of vague like the effectors don't respond to the control center anymore or something, that's not going to get you all your points. You've got to bring it to the whole person level.
Is the receptor medulla?
Too bad?
The receptor?
Yeah, you've got receptors in 2 places. And you have this, I mean, obviously you have that PowerPoint, and then that's from your book too, so. And there's probably, let's see. And if you want practice with that too, that's on here. Somebody can talk you through the feedback of breathing if you go to that one. All right. Anything else for 23 part 2? I think we did almost everything. All right, what about 24? Explain how the body ensures that food is properly digested. Any ideas?
Well, when the food, when it ends the pyloric valve, right? And if it's too big to go through it.
Yeah, that's what I just remember.
Yeah, so you're right. So there's 2 main things. That's the first one. The pyloric sphincter is very small. So anything that's large can't get through there. Does anyone remember the second one? It does? Yeah, how does it regulate the slowly? Like, how come your stomach just doesn't push it all through? Sort of. What happens at the duodenum? Yeah, let me go to that. Yeah, let's go to that video real fast, because I think that's the best way to show it. Is that part 1? I'll show you that little video, if I remember it. Enterogastric reflex. Which is this one. Should we watch the defecation reflex again, too?
As more and more chyme leaves the stomach, distension of stretch receptors in the duodenum triggers the enterogastric reflex. The enterogastric reflex has many functions. It inhibits excessive amounts of chyme from entering the duodenum. It reduces intestinal cell erosion by limiting inflow of gastric acid. And it increases the duration of the digestion of chyme. This occurs in preparation for the movement of chyme into the small intestine. The motor impulses in the enterogastric reflex are sympathetic.
All right. So anyways, first part is the sphincter is not very big. So small things, only small things can get through. Second part is, like you said, only a little bit of chyme goes into the small into the duodenum at a time, which is the enterogastric reflex. What do you think the stimulus was? Chyme going where? Okay, so and then where's the receptor? No, you'd think so.
Be the enterogastric reflex.
This is the whole. This whole thing is enterogastric reflex, which I should put up here.
Stretch receptors
Where?
in the duodenum.
Right. So if chyme comes in through the duodenum, it stretches it. Those receptors are turned on. Control center is still some neurons down there. Doesn't really matter. What's the effector?
Pyloric sphincter.
And then what's the response? What does the pyloric sphincter do? It opens or
Closed to keep too much from entering.
closes. So basically, whenever there's stuff in the duodenum that are stretching it out, this is activated, the sphincter's closed. Pyloric sphincter's closed. So that way, the food, the chyme stays in the stomach and it does its retropulsion, gets all mixed around, and it has time to get more digested. You just squirt in a little at a time. So as soon as this chyme leaves the duodenum, then that stimulus goes away and the sphincter opens. Chyme goes in, stimulus activated, sphincter closes. That's kind of how that works. All right. What else? Retropulsion is the chyme moving back in the wrong direction of digestion, basically. So it's not like, the food you digest makes a direct path through the stomach to the small intestine. It gets retropulsioned around and around by the stomach. I'm kind of curious. Does anyone know if you listen to bowel sounds, if you can actually tell what part you're listening to? Like if it's the stomach doing retropulsion, or you could hear if there's extra air in certain places too.
That's how you can tell if you have obstruction.
What does it sound like if you have an obstruction?
You don't hear that sound.
Oh really? It's just like
ceases.
Interesting.
So you have to do a GI assessment every day on people. So you just
Uh-huh.
really listen to all 4 quadrants. You're not really listening specifically to what sound it's making,
Just that there's
that it's
stuff
moving. If
going
not,
around.
you know, bust out the Melkamag.
The milk of magnesia.
Let me give you a brown cow. Throw it in some prune juice.
Oh, prune juice. It's crazy. All right, so then part 2 for 24. Which one? E. Oh, discuss the feed. Y'all really want to know about these feedback mechanisms? There sure are a lot of them. Did we at least do that assignment?
What is the question? Or what is
The feedback mechanism for the pH and peristalsis. See if I can find it. Yeah. Wait, this is it. So that's this one. And hopefully now that you've looked at so many of them, you're starting to get a little bit easier because it's always the same kind of logic. It's just slightly different stuff in the receptor, control center, response area. So for this one, there's 2 stimuluses. There's either high pH of gastric juice, which is basic, more basic. Remember, high pH, more basic, confusing in that way. Or the stomach stretching. And then you've got receptors, 2 kinds, either the chemoreceptor detecting the high pH or the stretch receptor detecting the stretching. Control center, that's just a cluster of neurons there. And then the effectors, the parietal cells make more HCl to lower the pH, and the smooth muscle contracts harder and faster because there's food in there. So you want to squeeze it and move it around quicker to help it digest, that mechanical digestion. So the response lowers the pH and increased mixing. So the digestion should happen faster. So probably a good way to study for all these feedback diagrams is make yourself a little table and just make sure you can memorize each of them. And it doesn't have to be long. Like, look how short this is, right? It's not like I'm writing paragraphs for each little step. Because once you kind of know it, you don't need to write the whole sentence. You can just write a word or 2, and you kind of know the rest of it. Like, you could expand on it. So the path, that is this one. So anything you absorb goes through the portal vein to the liver, basically. And then it goes to the vena cava, to the right atrium. So you probably don't need to know all those. So the path it takes, it gets absorbed, it goes to the portal vein, goes to the liver, goes to the hepatic vein, and the vena cava, and the heart. Which means all those nutrients go to the liver first to get processed and looked at. And toxins too. Or alcohol goes to the liver. What else?
For G, is it that, was it in the slideshow, just one of the?
Yeah. So for G, it's that table that's on the slideshow, or the table in the book. The functions of the hormone, or the enzymes. It's like lipases break down lipids, et cetera, et cetera.
Can you go for H?
H. Yeah, so that one. Basically, you just look back at the slideshow. It's got gastrin, stimulus, and response. You've got, I guess we already did that one. And then we've got the other two up there, too.
So we have to put all of that?
Yeah, so they're all on there. And if you notice, it doesn't say, for those, it doesn't say know the whole feedback diagram or something, just those specific things. So you need to know a little less about those than like the regulating the pH and peristalsis ones. And one little trick, the response is always going to decrease the stimulus. So that could kind of help you remember it too. So like this one, if the stimulus is low pH, what's the response? Increase the pH somehow. So maybe you remember put weak base secreted by the pancreas or something. Oh, we only have 5 minutes. What about 25 part 1? For part, oh, sorry, 25 still, or 24? Back to 25, I just want to make sure on there. 25 part 1, so we didn't do part 1 yet. I think she's talking about F on part 1. Are you talking about F on 25? All right, so ATP synthase, including what reaction it catalyzes and where it gets its energy from. So if you remember our acting thing, where did ATP synthase get its energy from directly? What? Not quite, that's the electron transport chain. It got it from H pluses, moving from high to low. Who was our great ATP synthase? I don't remember.
Marty.
Yeah. And then what reaction does it catalyze? She was turning and doing something. What was she doing?
Oh, she was releasing the H. No.
H pluses were making her spin to do something.
To smash the ADP to the P.
ADP plus P to ATP. That's the reaction. So adding a phosphate to ADP.
That's what you want?
That's the reaction. That's the reaction that happens. So a little trick, anytime somebody's asking about reactions or something, you should always see this arrow, like something, here's the reactants, there's the product.
On your test, like, let's just say that was your question.
Uh-huh.
Describe ATP synthesis, including what reaction.
Uh-huh.
Would you just want us to put that?
Well, that'd be,
Like,
well, it depends.
The whole ATP.
If all it said was identify what reaction it catalyzes,
Just put that.
you'd write that. If I asked you where it gets its energy from,
Right.
then you tell me the other one.
The what?
Then you tell me that H plus is going from high to low,
Okay.
It's like water flowing through it.
right? And D, I don't think we need to go over them. You have that from your groups. I know that whatever they had that you wrote down, that table, you have it. So study that. Don't go back and start from square one or something and read about glycolysis for an hour. We've already simplified it. You did that whole table. You have it. And if you weren't here, you lost it, ask somebody else, ask somebody in the class, they have it. The role of oxygen. So electrons come to the electron transport chain, they lose their energy, and then they combine with oxygen. The electrons combine with oxygen, hydrogen to make water. So oxygen's the final electron acceptor at the end of the electron transport chain. Yeah, so those electrons in the electron transport chain, you have to do something with them after you use them. So you give them to oxygen and then take hydrogen and make water out of it. All right, so for studying, best thing you can do, read over this once or twice, and then print yourself a blank study guide, and find out what you already know. Like, try to write it down without looking at anything. Circle the ones you're still confused about, and then quiz yourself on those till you get That's basically the way to do it. What I don't want you to do, so you've got note cards and stuff, don't keep quizzing yourself on words you already know. Because you know them. Spend your time on the harder stuff that you haven't figured out yet. You're still kind of hazy on. And you'll be fine. If you have any questions, when's our test then? Not till Tuesday, right? It's next time we meet. So Monday, lots of office hours. You can email me over the weekend if you get stuck on something. Do you know how many emails I get for help with tests? Like one a week. It's not a problem. I want you to ask me questions.